Patty, thank you for introducing me, and thank you to you and to Anita for gathering everyone, and to Shar in absentia for inviting me, and thank you all for coming midday to participate in this conversation. You know, the national. I'm a member of the National Council for Jewish Women. It's a very important organization to me, and obviously to all of you. And we, you do wonderful, amazing work, and women power. All of our voices together are able to make really cultural and social changes, and good on us, right? So let me ask first, how many people have read the book? So I kind of can gauge. Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you. So you'll have a little bit more of an insider view, but I'll try uh, try to talk about some things that have come up, and certainly during the course of my talk, if you have something to ask me again, put your name in the chat, raise your hand, and or wait till afterwards, and I'll like to get to as many questions as you want. Feel free to ask me anything. I don't think there's anything I don't want to answer, but I won't be shy either way. So I have to say that obviously this has been an unusual and very, very, very stressful year for everyone on so many levels. Actually, my mother-in-law, my beloved mother-in-law, died of COVID at the beginning of the pandemic. She was 98 years old. She caught the virus and she succumbed to it. So it had very sad overtones for us. For me, a bizarre thing happened to me 2.5 years ago. I had an infection in a tooth underneath a cap that had the tooth had a root canal, and so I didn't know there was an infection there. But in fact, the bacteria got into my bloodstream and then ate two of my heart valves. I was healthy as a hog. I had emergency surgery and then had to have two valves replaced. I ended up with a pig valve and a cow valve. I don't know in the morning whether I should wake up and moo or oink, but I'm here. But it did instill the fear of God in me about being out and about during this pandemic. And the only reason why I'm telling you these tales of woe right up front is that the book really saved my life. Because I was really, really, really isolated. I didn't want to take any chance at all. And here it is, called Funny You Don't Look Like a Rabbi, a memoir of unorthodox transformation. I'll talk more about the cover later, too. Many people ask me about it because it doesn't show my face. And the reason why the book, it came out on April the 2nd, and it was just a crazy time for it to be published. First of all, it was, the pandemic was already rearing its head. No one really knew what was going to happen. The book was chosen as a Jewish Book Council book, and I obviously couldn't go out and speak about it. And, anybody who knows me knows that I do love to hug and meet in person and chat, and not only to just talk, but to also to listen to your stories. So it really was not possible. Not to mention that 2 weeks later was Passover, and everyone was trying to figure out how Passover was going to unfold in the midst of this. The technology really not even where it is now, and everyone was trying to be creative. So none of my rabbinic colleagues were particularly helpful to me, and that's not a slight on them or a complaint. It's a statement of fact at the beginning. But in fact, I ended up having like 28 Zooms during the year, marketing the book the best that I could, given the circumstances, and really meeting people the way I'm meeting you now, having a chance to talk, to listen. And I think about how difficult it is, and for all of the complaints that we have about not being together as a community and hugging and kissing and doing all the things that we're used to, I also have to think about Anne Frank and her family, all those 7 people in that annex. I don't know how many of you have been to Amsterdam, but if you've been to that annex and you see the way they lived without being able to communicate with anybody, except for MPs and whoever else was deemed safe. And I think about Nelson Mandela in Robben Island for so many years, also uh, able to communicate a little bit better, obviously, but not to the degree that we're able to meet this morning. So I'm really really grateful that I had the book, and that even though I have written 4 books, this one was the one that I pursued for publication. And it was very, as I said, interesting to me. I don't know about you, but there was a book written by Meg Wolitzer called The Interestings, and my husband and I decided that we have become the uninterestings during this pandemic, because basically what we do is we work, we cook, um, we eat dinner, and then we watch Netflix. And there's not a lot to talk about. Hasn't been a lot to talk about. Um, and now mostly the conversation is about re-engaging, whether you've had the vaccine, whether you're where you can get it if you haven't gotten it. So I'm looking forward to a really more interesting time when we can get back into the theaters and get back into our synagogues, and to the author events at the library and all the places that we normally go. So a little bit about the book. I wrote this book more than a dozen years ago. I sat down and banged out about 550 pages in a week or two, frankly. It was completely unwieldy. At the beginning, and I really sat with it because there were a couple of stories in the book that I wasn't sure I wanted to tell. It was the story about my childhood. My father's wife is still alive, and I don't paint the greatest picture of her. Um, and the other thing was being rejected from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, which I thought was going to be a game ender, frankly, a dream crusher. And so no one really wants to talk about their rejections and their losses. So I sat on it for a long time. At one point, I had a pretty hotshot agent in New York who really, I don't know, I think didn't really know how to market it. And he really was pushing me to publish it myself. He thought that I would make more money doing it that way. And eventually he thought he wasn't going to make enough money because he wasn't Jewish. And he thought that I was primarily addressing a Jewish audience. That being said, it really kind of hurt me a little bit because he went to the big publishing houses. And because he went there, and they were kind of biting at that time. I couldn't. They had already thought that the book had been shopped, so I was sitting with a manuscript of 550 pages or so. I mean, even Michelle Obama's memoir biography wasn't that long, and she has an amazing social platform and a public persona that one could only hope to have if you want to be a bookseller. Now, he wrote his book is much longer, but he was a president. uh, but eventually what happened was I found a freelance. Well, I'll call her freelance. She was on leave, maternity leave from Random House. She was looking for editorial gigs, and I found her, and she edited my manuscript. And at that point, I was able to sell it. So it was published by Three River Press, which White River Press, sorry, which is a hybrid press. There were certain things that I had to um, facilitate myself, but the woman who is the CEO of the White River Press was a former literary agent herself. She was amazing to work with, and she kind of has a little bit of a niche with rabbis. She published Sheila Peltz Weinberg's books, and she was wonderful to work with. And so there it is. It came out on April the 2nd. So, any questions before I really go on? That's the kind of historic background to the book. But but it is one of the points that I also want to make, which is there's more than one way to skin a cat. You have a book you want to write, uh, Random House or Simon and Schuster may or may not buy it. There really are only a handful of publishing houses these days. It's very difficult unless you're Nelson DeMille or Jennifer Weiner, somebody like that. It's tough, and you don't really make money on it. Uh, but but even the smaller prints are imprints of those larger houses. And yet, I got my book out, and I was able to earn the appellation of being an author. Um, so the book starts really at a very, very low point in my life. I was born in Reading, Pennsylvania, and I go all the way back there on a memoir because memoirs generally a kind of a slice of life, a certain period of time. But I went back all those years ago because they were pivotal for me. Once my parents were separated and they got divorced, and I talk about the day that I found out that my father was leaving the house as sort of last night's nightmare. That became the day when we went from the haves to the relative haves to the have-nots. My father left. He was involved with another woman who eventually he married, and he moved to Philadelphia. My mother was very young when she had me and was very young when he left. She didn't have any job skills. In fact, she didn't even drive. And we went really from really not worrying about money, particularly, to really being impoverished and being on food stamps. But in my mother's inimitable wisdom, she moved us to Brooklyn, New York. That's where her parents were, her immigrant parents, and all of the cousins and all of the close knit rest of the family, who really supported us, nourished us. And I think the reason why my sister and I are not wackadoodles is because they were there for us. My grandparents, our story really is that my great grandfather came over to the US from Poland. They were from Łódź, and they came over in 1912. He came over in 1912 by himself. He was a tailor and a furrier. That was the trade that a lot of the people that came over from the Pale and from area near there, textile industry particularly. And he was here for 8 years by himself. He called for my great grandmother, who, by the way, was a kind of a dairy farmer like Tevya. And it is rumored that she sold tobacco to the Red Army, and that is how she sustained herself and the four boys that she was supporting. Eventually, when they all came over to America in 1920, which was really the height of the immigration from that area, um, then they had another child, my aunt Anne, and that family was then complete. But when my grandparents came over, I mean, there was nothing more important than children. And having come from war torn Europe, although at that time it was basically pre World War One, but they really extolled the blessings of children. And I was the first grandchild and the first great grandchild at that time. And I even write in the book, I was hailed as the Messiah in the house of Yaskolka. That was their name. And so they made me feel very loved, and they were beloved. They filled up our refrigerator and made the transition from a lovely house in a suburban neighborhood in Reading, Pennsylvania, to the back of a duplex in a studio apartment of Italian Jews who had emigrated in Brooklyn, New York. So it was a very difficult transition. My mother was depressed. It was very hard to get it together for her. Eventually, she did. I have to give her so much credit because now that I'm a mom and a grandmother, and I see the kind of obstacles that she had and how she had two little kids by herself. My sister, I was 9 and my sister was 5 when all of this happened. and how she managed to pull it off. And in fact, not only are my sister and I not wackadoodles, but we're fairly successful. The one thing, Patty, that you didn't say when you were giving away titles is wife. I've been a wife for 52 years. So we've managed to have both my sister and I successful marriages and successful relationships. My sister is a speech pathologist, and so we did okay given our very meager and humble beginnings. Um, and eventually, though, I my father kind of talked me into moving back to Philadelphia from Brooklyn because I needed somebody to pay for college, and I ended up moving in with my father and his wife, and she was terribly unkind to me. But eventually, I did get a degree, and I found my husband in Philadelphia, and other than a stint in Chicago for about 10 years after we were married for about 2 years, we've been living in Philadelphia, where we love to be. So that's a bit of the story. My husband started to feel successful in Chicago. He opened up the Chicago office. He's in the textile business, amazing what's left of it. But he has been basically a denim broker. And when he started to feel some sense of financial success, it was pretty incredible because I was feeling less than. I didn't know what was going on, but I was yearning for something. I had a hunger for something. I don't know exactly what that was, but eventually, in some kind of stillness and some kind of questing, I realized that I was looking for spirituality. And when I came back to Philadelphia, many of the pieces came together, and I began to be on that journey, on that quest for spirituality, and eventually uh, on the path to the rabbinate. But again, that wasn't a path of ease. It was a path of great resistance. Um, we belonged to Temple Sinai when we moved back here. We lived in Upper Dublin. Rabbi Sidney Greenberg was our rabbi. He had daughters, and so he was very generous about allowing access to the Bima for women. And we took a lot of classes with him, and he was very inspiring. That part of him was very inspiring. And um, and also Cantor Chaitovsky, I must say, he was an Orthodox rabbi, but he was very instrumental in teaching women how to learn Torah and so on. And I had heard a lot of different voices about perhaps pursuing the path to the rabbinate. But the catalyst for me, the what Oprah would call the aha moment, was when I was invited to go to Poland and Israel. And I went to Auschwitz and to some of the other camps, and I picked up a clump of soil. I say in the book, I picked up a clump of soil like Scarlett O'Hara and Tara, realizing now that apparently it's not politically correct. So the next printing, that's not going to be the metaphor that I use. But there were bones in the soil that I picked up. And those bones were people like my grandparents who were not able to get out, people who were even more well known than my grandparents, who were not at all well known, but authors and painters and chefs and butchers and all kinds of productive religious people in the society that perished, and many of whom, most of whom, were not given a proper burial, even. And they really did speak to me. I heard voices there. I really did. I heard the voices of my departed brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, and also of my grandparents who said to me, Lynnda, be Jewish, be the most Jewish you can be. And so for one fleeting minute, I thought, oh, maybe I could be a rabbi. But it was really pretty ridiculous thought because I didn't know an aleph from a bet at that time, truthfully. And I was already in my 40s. It was interesting because my grandparents were observant, and I talk about the time that my grandmother took me to synagogue to to hear the blowing of the shofar, not knowing what the shofar was, but actually being another of those pivotal moments that I found dramatic, really, to be up in the women's section and watching all those striped totes swaying, and then listening to the sound of the shofar, sitting with the women up there, watching the whole scene unfold, getting dressed up in my Mary Janes and poofy pink outfit, and realizing that there was something very, very compelling about it, but I didn't understand. Because we really had no money, I was not able to go to Hebrew school. I did not go to Camp Ramah. I was mentioning to Patty before a lot of people got on that I did actually go to Pioneer on a scholarship one year for 1 month, but none of those things were available to me. So anything that I learned, I really learned at the seat or the knees of my aunts and uncles and cousins, but I had really no formal education. And so when I came back from Poland, I started to study, and I started to take classes at Temple University, where I had graduated 25 years earlier. And and Laura Levitt, Dr. Laura Levitt, who became a mentor to me, said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a rabbi?" And my husband also said it to me in a kind of crazy way one time too, which was really crazy because he's not particularly religious. He's not particularly contemplative. This isn't so much on his radar screen, and his whole life changed because his wife became a rabbi. He always jokes that I was a cheerleader and I turned into a rabbi. And what kind of a joke was that? And eventually I did start to study as a non-matriculated student at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. And then there was a kind of I talk about it a little bit in the book too, but there was kind of a misunderstanding about an article that I had written that they didn't like very much, which was horrible, horrifying for me because I only wrote puff pieces, only flattering pieces, and the fact that they found this article not flattering was abhorrent to me. But eventually, I found my way to the Academy for Jewish Religion. That was another upheaval. And we kind of moved part time to New York for those 5 years. And in 2003, I was ordained at the Academy for Jewish Religion in New York. And I think, what is really significant about that story is that I entered rabbinical school at age 50. And people were saying to me, 50? Why would you go to school at 50? Not to mention that I really was leading a kind of privileged life. And I was leading a meaningful life, really. I mean, I was all those things that you said, except for author. I was involved with, engaged with the community. I was teaching. I had my own business. I had a public relations business. I had children, and yet, as I mentioned, there was really something deep down inside that felt very not self-actualizing. That I wasn't realizing my potential. That I wasn't going where I needed to go, but it didn't have a name really at that time. And as I said, there were people, I even got letters from people that said, "You're so successful in this or this or this. Why would you go, why would you chase that crazy dream?" And the truth is, I'm now 72. I will be 73 in July. And so on May the 20th, I will have been a rabbi for 18 years. So if I had listened to people tell me not to go to rabbinical school at age 50, by the way, it did have its issues, I must say. I can talk about that a little bit. Having not been in school for 25 years, the memory wasn't as sharp. Not also having some of the background that some of my compatriots had was also a little challenging, but I made it. And so I have had really the most wonderful life, not only before becoming a rabbi, but as a result of being ordained in 2003. I've had the privilege of doing so many things, um, and to serve God in that capacity, and to be of service to humanity and particularly to the Jewish community. And I just feel so blessed that I was able to do that. And so that's kind of where I am, and I also know that I wrote the book because I'm a storyteller, because I'm a writer, and I write every day. That's another thing that I did during this pandemic. I wrote every single day. I have another book that is just about ready to see the light of day too. Um, but I wrote it for you as well. And the reason why I wrote it for you is that I wanted to make sure that you saw through your story through my story. That it doesn't matter how old you are, if you have something that you want to do, that you should listen to the voice that's telling you what to do. I call it the still small voice. That's not original. It comes from the Book of Kings, and we read about the still small voice during the high holiday season. But what is that still small voice telling you to do? I think a lot of people have had a chance to listen to it during this, if we weren't too anxious, because a lot of people were also very anxious and very challenged by being inside and isolated during this pandemic, during this whole quarantine season. But a lot of people have just thought about what it was, what would their next step look like. I know somebody whose mother just got a PhD at 89 years old online. I know somebody that was in the wedding planning business and she started baking cookies. She loves to be in the kitchen, and she started giving these cookies to frontline workers and making people pass it forward. My own sister-in-law was very helpful to my brother who had a techie business, and they sold the business, and she decided to pivot, and now she's a yoga meditation teacher and also makes unbelievable jewelry. My own daughter, for example, is an attorney, and she worked in a boutique firm for many years, and now she's selling software to law firms. So she's combined both her dad's selling ability to the fact that she has a law degree as well. And also to say that if you're still small voices saying to you, I had a career before, I'm at a place in my life now where I want to rest, I want to play golf, I want to play canasta, I want to volunteer. That's good too. That we need to be able to stand in our power. What is that power? And that we shouldn't be listening to other people's judgments about what we look like, about what we can do, about how old we are, how young we are, the choices that we make. That it has to do with, if you have God language, what is God telling you to do? If that's not as defined, what is it that inside um, you are hearing the voices telling you to do? And if you're not hearing the voices yet, I would say get still, listen for them, and they will be there as well. And so that's basically my raison d'etre on writing the book, was to tell the story, but to also be able to tell other people, or to invite other people. I can't tell anybody really what to do, but to invite other people to listen to the stories inside them, and to decide what is it that gives you joy, that gives you bliss, that makes you feel like you have meaning and purpose in the world, that satisfies your spiritual needs, and hopefully you will be able to see some of those, get some of those answers from reading about my story. So that's it for now. I cannot believe that I just talked on and on for as long as I did, and I hope that I answered some of the questions even that you had um, even at the beginning of the talk. But I'd love to take other questions now if anybody has them. While you're getting it together, I alluded to this before. So my face is not showing. There are a couple of stories in here about people saying to me, "You don't look like a rabbi." They still say that to me. I'm not exactly sure what a rabbi looks like. I have rabbi friends that are Asian, African American, male, female, transgender, and so forth. I don't think there is such a thing as what does a rabbi look like. Of course, if you Google rabbi, mostly what will come up will be Orthodox rabbis with stroimels and or tendrils, and not necessarily rabbis that look like me. And the reason why we decided not to show my face is because it doesn't matter really what you look like. It matters what you do. And it doesn't matter what the cover looks like. I mean, I have all the accoutrements of being Jewish. I'm reading a conservative Siddur in the picture. I have a Jewish star that my sister bought me actually when I was ordained. I'm wearing a talis, and yet people say, "Oh, you don't look like a rabbi." They may even say you don't look Jewish, and I say, "Don't if you can't judge a book by a cover, even though that's a kind of a cliche. It's what's inside that matters. It's not what this looks like. It's what's inside that matters. What's the message? What's the story? How is that going to inform your own story? Where do you see yourself fitting into the large tapestry of humanity, the smaller tapestry of Judaism? And so we made a decision to print the cover that way. So what do you think? Do you have any thoughts about that, by the way, about not showing your face on the cover? Did it strike anybody as odd? So did I answer all of your questions?
I wanted to ask you about the calling.
Uh,
We don't usually think of Judaism as having a calling.
mm-hmm.
But you did refer to that you had a calling, and did you? What do you mean by having a calling?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you know, somehow the calling did seem to be couched in Christian language, but in fact, we do have a calling. I mean, we have the book of Leviticus, which is Vayikra, and God called. So we do have callings. We have, and God called in the Torah to Moses, to Abraham, to Hagar. I mean, there are a lot of people uh, that are models in the Torah that God called to. Now, so I think we're okay, as using the metaphor of the calling. Um, and as I mentioned, I had lots of little callings. It wasn't. I jokingly say, it wasn't. This one butt cold, this loud voice that said, "Hey, you with the Prada shoes, get out of your comfort level." It was really those little voices, the conversation that I had about Amy Eilberg coming to Temple Sinai as the first conservative women ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary. It was meeting Danny Siegel, the writer, the poet, who said to me, one time when I met him in Israel, "You are doing very good things in the community, but you don't know enough. You need to study." It was going to Temple University and taking Holocaust courses. And Laura Levitt saying to me, "Have you ever thought about becoming a rabbi?" It was my husband who said to me, "If God forbid anything ever happened to me," then he said this to me. He said, "You would marry right away. You'd marry some rabbi," he said, "or you would become one." Become one. It was just so startling to hear him say that. And then more and more people were saying it to me, and more I was beginning to feel it inside. And then, of course, it was the Auschwitz. And also, I must say, I didn't give very much time to Israel this morning, this afternoon. But Israel is a very, very, very big passion of mine. And even though it's not exactly easy to be a rabbi, a female rabbi in Israel, or even wear your kippah in Jerusalem, um, uh, so my love of Israel really informed my love of Judaism as well. And so that was part of the calling. So it was all of those things that really called to me, and I had to figure out how to coalesce those voices and make it work because it was challenging. It was challenging. So yeah, Diane.
Have you ever met Sally Presand, who was the first woman ordained, and this year is the 50th anniversary of her ordination, which was
Isn't that
amazing.
amazing? Isn't that unbelievable? It is unbelievable. Yes, I have met her. We're not friends, but of course, I have met her. I'd like to be her friend, but it is she was quite a trailblazer, quite a brave, courageous trailblazer, and we stand on her shoulders. And now we're estimating that there probably worldwide are about 1,500 female rabbis. When you hear 1,500, you think, whoa, that's a lot. But if you compare the amount of female rabbis to the number of male rabbis, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of them since the beginning of time. I mean, we even called Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our rabbi. It is, we're very small in comparison. Not better, not worse. Women have a different style of leadership sometimes. We have different voices, but I definitely think that women's voices in the rabbinate have definitely been have enhanced the rabbinate to a great degree, and it's really amazing when we can work together. Yeah, thank you.
Rabbi,
Anita.
um,
Yeah,
you speak pretty openly about people that have hurt you, and being able to forgive and move on is difficult, especially in our environment today with the political division that we've all been through. And I know so many families that people literally don't talk to each other anymore, unfortunately. Can you talk a little bit about being able to move on from hurt?
well, which hurt?
Anyone. All of them?
Yeah.
Or personally, what you've been through to be able to move on?
Absolutely. I don't know. I just evolved in a way. I guess, I'm 73 or 72. And I've had a lot of hurts and a lot of challenges. And I've also been very, very privileged. So I think the gratitude factor has really outweighed the hurt factor. Um, and I think that I don't get stuck in that stuff anymore. I guess I'm a meditator, and I work on myself. I do Musar. I for 1,000 years I haven't, but back in the day I went into therapy and so on, and so I I really discovered through the process of self discovery that I it wasn't helpful to me to hold on. I mean, the person or people who hurt me, uh, they go on their about their lives, and I'm sitting there with a mat on. It doesn't work. So I don't marinate in that stuff anymore. I percolate in it actually. It's a springboard for me. What happened at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College was unfortunate, but they did me a great, great favor. Um, so actually, let me go back. If we're talking about my father's wife, I mean, I have a half brother. My father and his wife had a child, and he and I are very, very close. I'm very close to my sister-in-law also, and they have two children who are my wonderful nephews. So occasionally I will see her, and we're cordial. I mean, I don't go out to lunch with her, but I don't want that in my life. I think it's too destructive. And when I hear about families that don't talk to this one or that one, it's just so painful. It's painful to hear that, but I understand. It's people feeling that they were slighted, people feeling that they were hurt. People, there's money issues very often that come into play, parental issues, and those things do need to be dealt with. And in terms of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, as I started to say, I mean, those rabbis are my colleagues now, and we work together. And I don't hold any animus. I try very hard, and specifically in this climate, I must say that there were people on the other side of the aisle of where I was. I really couldn't believe it. And I had to have a conversation with myself and say, I am not allowing that political toxicity to ruin a friendship or to ruin family members because they think in a different way. I'm not giving that other side that power. And so I think that was the place that it was more of a benevolent place. And I think some of the places where we don't agree, I think if it is people that's in my sphere, we kind of agree not to talk politics. And the racial divide, I have to say, I'm learning. And part of what I did this year, I read the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which was to me transformative. And I'm taking a course now at Gratz College, where I taught for many years myself, with Dr. Ruth Sandberg. She's doing a historical overview of African Americans and the Jewish community. And I'm finding it very informative because I think, we've both been enslaved peoples, we've both been marginalized, and we're both really victims or targets, shall we say, of this new neo-Nazism, this white supremacy that has arisen. And so we need to be able to work better together. And I wanted to learn more. So I think that once I have the freedom to be able to uh, be in conversation more and to be in a place where I'm able to make some changes, that's one of the directions that I want to go. I want to make sure that we can work together. Jews and African Americans can work together and have a benevolent dialogue because I think it's very important.
We have a message in the chat box.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a message in the chat for you.
Oh, a few of them. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Shall I read it to you?
Yes. Okay. Well, here's one.
You-
So I went to school with Nita. So that is my husband's sister. She lives in the same building with us in the Philadelphian. She lost her husband sadly. My brother-in-law Steve several years ago. Quite a horrible story, actually. But she's a therapist and she's still working on Zoom. And I think she's doing rather well given the circumstances. So if I make soup, I send it down to her too. And we're just beginning as a family now that we're all vaccinated to be able to. I am unmuted. Okay. Um, that that we've been able to see each other again as a family. We're not quite there for Passover because a lot of the 40 somethings and definitely the little kids have not been vaccinated. So there's some members of the family that don't want to get together yet, but in person. But we're getting there. I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling optimistic. I'm not exactly sure how to re-engage, but it's feeling a little bit more freeing. How about for all of you? Is it a little bit more freeing? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like hope is on the horizon, right? Yeah. The question is, am I affiliated with a congregation? And is Reform conservative or what? And was I religious growing up as a young woman? So don't wish to be 50 again. Be great in where you are. I mean, that is, be in the moment. Get the most out of the day. Be the best you can at whatever age you are. That's kind of the overriding message. So I am not affiliated. Well, I'm not a pulpit rabbi, but I actually belong to Beth Am, up in that neck of the woods, to Old York Road Temple Beth Am. I was a student rabbi there, and I kind of have an affiliation there, being that I fill in for Rabbi Leib occasionally. I have taught adult education there. When the rabbis are not available for a life cycle event, they ask me to fill in, if possible, for funerals, for baby namings, for weddings. So I get a lot of work from them. Uh, I grew up conservative, but Rabbi Lee, because he was from South Africa and was ordained at Leo Beck College in London, where the denominational um, the separations are a little bit different than what we have here in America. He's pretty traditional, so that it was a very comfortable transition for me. And no, I was not religious growing up at all, because I was a girl and there was just no money for a girl to go to school, and I was only as religious as my grandparents were. I mean, my parents were first generation Americans, and they wanted to be American, and the religion was not important for them. Although my mother was very, very knowledgeable, we did not keep kosher in our house. In fact, it was hide the bacon when my grandparents came. Um, but that has shifted for me. I do keep a kosher home, and much more religious. But I feel comfortable because I went to the academy, which was a pluralistic institution. I feel pretty comfortable in most synagogues. And when I'm in New York now, I belong to Central Synagogue. Speaking about not looking like a rabbi, Rabbi Angela Buckdahl, who is quite well known, is an Asian rabbi. She's Korean. Her mother was Buddhist. Her father was Jewish. She was a cantor first, quite a brilliant one, and then she became a rabbi, and the rabbi of a very, very successful and large synagogue in New York City. And she's always on the list of the most influential rabbis. So I belong there, but I also go. It depends when we get through the tunnel. Services start at Central Synagogue at 6 o'clock. If we're a little bit, running behind that afternoon, I'll go to BJ. I've gone to Romamu. I worked at the 92nd Street Y for 6 years. And part of my job was to pray around, to go to the different synagogues, so that when we did a conversion, or when we recommended a conversion or formed a bet din for someone to convert to Judaism, that they had a good community that they could be ensconced in, to support them in their new Jewish journey. So I know a lot about the synagogues in New York, and the same thing here as well. Sometimes I go to Rhoda Sholem, sometimes I go to BZBI. I feel pretty comfortable in most of the synagogues. Or Zerua, also, I don't know if anybody knows Or Zerua, Rabbi Shelley Barnathan. She's a Reconstructionist rabbi, and she formed her own synagogue. So, yeah, I like shul. I'm looking forward to being able to congregate again. I do think that once we emerge from this fully, and God knows when that will be, but hopefully sooner rather than later, it's going to look a little bit like a hybrid. I think there are a lot of people that like to come to Minyan in their yoga pants, that don't necessarily want to take their car out of the parking garage and drive someplace. So I think that people will still show up on Zoom, and I think that there will also definitely be a need to be together and to congregate together. So, yeah.
We have any more questions for Rabbi? Anybody? Raise your hand, or if you unmute yourself.
Well, I'd like to say in closing that, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and for all of you. And if in fact you do get a chance to read the book, I hope that you enjoy it. And The marketing person tells me that I should tell people that they should go on Amazon or Goodreads and give a good review, because that bumps sales and makes the books want to buy the bookstores want to buy the books, and so on. So I would ask you to do that. And I would also say, please continue to be safe. Please continue to be healthy. Please continue to be sane-ish. I know it's been kind of challenging to all of us. And I wish all of you a sweet and kosher Pesach, and may we all get out of the narrow places. I mean, we are in real time here. We're in that narrow place. May we all get out of whatever form of slavery we have been living in the narrow places, and be able to see the light, be able to continue on with our lives, and to find that still small voice that is telling us what to do, to be happy, to be productive, to lead a meaningful and purposeful life. Thank you again for coming.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Patty, Anita, and Shar, and all of you.
Thank you
Great.
so much, Rabbi. A
Thank
beautiful
you.
program. And I wanted to remind everybody they can get your book on Amazon, and Amazon Smiles for National Council. And they can order it, putting it on. And to remind everybody to sign up for our April 15th program, and have a kosher Pesach, a sweet Pesach. And thank you again, Rabbi. It was a wonderful program. Thank you, and we really appreciate you, and appreciate your book, and appreciate you. Thank you. Anybody have a
Thank
last
you.
minute question?
I
No?
appreciate all of you.
Thank
Truly,
you.
truly, truly. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day.